Hello, I'm Mary Foley, your host for the Rays of Hope program, and I invite you to stay tuned for a very important show on self-defense. Shocking statistics tell us that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men will be victims of sexual assault at some point in their lifetime, and even more importantly, sometimes before the age of 18. So today we want to devote enough time to tell you about a very important topic, which is self-defense, how you can reduce your risk of being a victim of a sexual crime. And today we have with us LeAnne Garland from the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center.
Hello.
Glad you joined us. You are the victim's advocate for PASAC, as we're going to refer to it from now on. And I'd like for you to take just a moment. I know that you've been on our program before, but for viewers that may be new to Rays of Hope, I'd like for you to take just a minute and tell them what does the victim's advocate do and how you became a part of the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center.
Well, I started 3 years ago, which seems like forever ago now, but and what the victim advocate does is I go to hospital calls with clients whenever they make the initial report to law enforcement or at the hospital. I stay with them through the entire process at the hospital and then through the entire legal process, meaning filing the report with the police, and then through the entire court process as well. Each court hearing they have, I go with them and explain the court process to them and how that will affect them. I also provide law enforcement trainings to law enforcement in our area about how to respond to sexual assault victims and how that we can work together effectively to make the process as easy as possible for them.
So it's my understanding that less than, or right around 10% of sexual crimes are actually reported to law enforcement. So do you feel like your role is important? Well, obviously you think it's important, but do you think it's beneficial to helping raise that number?
Oh yeah. Victims of sexual assault usually don't report it or are very low in reporting because of the fact of the stigma that's attached, or maybe their own personal dealings with law enforcement. They don't want to go to the police department, or they have this awful image of law enforcement for whatever reason. So as my role is I try to go in and help them understand why law enforcement asks the questions that they do and why their jobs are so different than mine, and try to build that relationship between law enforcement and the victim. That way the process is smooth. If there's any bumps in the road, we work those out together. And from that, I think other victims that maybe see people going through that process and see that it's not as hard as maybe they imagined, or not as awful to talk to law enforcement about it, then that will encourage them to come forward as well.
I also find it, I'd like for us to talk just a little bit about the term advocate. I think that we kind of get wrapped up just in the fact that you're there for victims and you work with law enforcement, and we're all about the judicial system. But the term advocate, I think, says a lot that sometimes gets overlooked. For lack of not to define it by its very nature, but just to explain from your perspective and in your heart, what is the role of an advocate when you actually see that client for the first time?
When I view advocate or my position that way, it's more of kind of speaking up for people when they can't do it themselves, protecting them, making sure that their rights are being protected, that they know their rights. A lot of people don't know their rights as a victim. So I make sure that they're aware of that, and then I make sure that nobody violates those rights while we're working together. So I make sure I speak up for them when at the point in time they're not even thinking about all these other little things that could be going wrong.
And I would think by the nature of the crime itself, they feel devalued, like they've lost their voice. And I think that's why it's so powerful to have somebody in their corner that's going to be with them every step of the way. So you've been with the agency for 3 years, and you've been providing these services. And this past year, the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center, and specifically you, were awarded a grant from the Kentucky Bar Association. tell us a little bit about that and what you hope to accomplish, because I think that will lead us into the topic of self-defense for today's program.
What I already provided was trainings to law enforcement in our area. And that would just be going in and talking to them and that kind of thing. So what we did is the grant has provided us the funds to provide training manuals to every law enforcement officer in the Purchase area. So not only will I get to meet with them and talk with them about ways that they can learn about sexual assault and learn how to work with sexual assault victims, but they're also going to have that with them, in paper with them to take with them if they forget or have a question or want to go back and maybe refresh over it or something. And then also part of that is a handbook to give to victims of sexual assault that explains every step of the legal process. So working on that grant covers working on both ends with the victims and with the professionals as to how everything should run.
So in a sense, it really is knowledge is power, and we're going to put knowledge in the hands of the official and knowledge in the hand of the victim. So together, the unknown is somewhat erased, and it gives the victim some control on their journey to becoming a survivor. You've been passionate about this, obviously, for a long time, but something changed in terms of our approach. So not only are you being an advocate and not only are you working with law enforcement to educate them, but out of those two roles, you have forged quite a strong partnership with the Paducah Police Department. Talk to me a little bit about that and then what that partnership brought in terms of self-defense.
I obviously work with Paducah Police Department, several cases, and through that, I've gotten to know a lot of the officers and detectives mainly, and working with them, and we just kind of have an understanding of what we each do. I think that's kind of how good partnerships work. Is they know my role, I know their role, and we work together in that way. What I started to notice that was a problem was that we kept having these victims come in, and I think society always thinks, well, why didn't you do something back? Why did you let this happen? And initially, when I started thinking that way, it was probably over a year ago when you would see it all over the place, all these self-defense classes popping up. And in that, I started to go to see what was being offered to women in our area, and see what they were being taught, and if it was what I thought would benefit people that I work with, you know. And from that, I thought, we're missing a vital piece. We're teaching great things, but this isn't something for everybody, So I started to work with the police department, and I think several of them were checking out self-defense on their own as well. And so a couple different programs were mentioned, and I checked into the R.A.D program and saw that it was something that would benefit everybody and that everybody could use.
And so if you could tell me succinctly, because we'll come back and we'll really talk about R.A.D, what it is and what it means and why it's something that our viewers are certainly going to want to be a part of. But just to give us an overview and begin to set that framework, what is R.A.D, what does that stand for, and how is it different? What intrigued you about this program?
The R.A.D program, it stands for Rape Aggression Defense Systems, and it's different from every other self-defense that's offered in our area. It is strictly for women. There are no men that are allowed to watch it or anything. The only men that are allowed in there are ones that have been trained and are instructors, or I think I'm going to start pulling like maybe one of the officers in to just demonstrate the moves on them. It is not martial arts based. It does not advocate for use of weapons. It teaches women to acknowledge their own power and acknowledge their own ability to fight back. And I think that was the big thing that really got me was so often everybody says, why don't you fight back, or why don't you do this, or you need to take martial arts, or you need to buy a gun, or you need to do all this other stuff, but nobody's telling women that they can fight back. It's why didn't you fight back? So the main, one of the main things that I focus on is recognizing your ability to fight back and that you can, and this is how.
I see. And I'd like to take just a moment, right now to talk about the fact that we are in no way sending the message for those that have been victimized that they've done something wrong if they reacted a certain way, because as you know, at the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center, what we tell victims is you did what you had to do to survive, and that was what it took, whether that was fighting or whether that was being still, being quiet. You did what you had to do in the moment, and you reacted to the trauma the best way you knew how. So having said that, and having put that disclaimer out, that this is in no way sending the message that the clients have done something wrong if they didn't feel prepared or didn't know what to do.
Right.
This is more of a prevention program.
Right.
We often take some time to talk to the victim, but today we're talking to the viewer that in a preventative way. There are things you can do, ways you can be prepared. And so I want to take just a quick break and come back. And when we do, I want you to begin to tell us how our community can get behind this partnership between the Paducah Police Department and between the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center, and how women can be empowered to do what they need to do. So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to put some numbers up on the screen for you on how to contact us if you have questions. And when we come back, we are going to talk about self-defense, your role in the community, and your role and obligation to yourself to reduce your risk of becoming a victim of sexual crime. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Rays of Hope, and today we're talking about a very important topic, a topic of prevention education, and we have our guest with us, LeAnne Garland from the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center. She's the victim's advocate, and she's been talking with us about a partnership with the Paducah Police Department, and thank you so much for coming today. You left right on the other side of the break talking about R.A.D. Tell me again what R.A.D is, and then let's begin to talk about these classes and what folks can expect if they choose to participate.
R.A.D is Rape Aggression Defense System, self-defense. It's a program specifically designed for women to learn techniques for self-defense and ways to fight back, practical, everyday things that women could use.
Okay, so now R.A.D has been brought to our area, and you had to do quite a bit of training to be able to bring this to our area. And so now we are offering classes to the public. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The classes that I offered, the training, let me start there, because that's, I think people don't understand that all self-defense trainings are different and techniques are different. Some of the trainings that are offered in our area are martial arts based, and everything, you know, they have that kind of
feel to them.
Yeah. So when I started checking into the R.A.D program, it is a program that is it has a very high standard. So when I went through the training, it was a 30-hour training. You had to take a test and be certified and all of that. So it wasn't just I decided one day to learn a couple techniques and then go out and teach.
Okay.
The class itself focuses on practical techniques that any woman can use. The founder of the program set it up that if his mother could not do the techniques, that it was not included in the program.
Well, I find that very refreshing. I'm going to interrupt you right there because I'm thinking what viewers may be thinking. Do I have to be an athlete? Do I have to have some sort of, background in martial arts? Do I have to be at a certain level of fitness in order to take this class? So you're saying that all ages, all women could participate, or just, I'm sure there's an age requirement, but you're not going to be not in shape enough to participate.
Right, and that's a huge concern for many people, is that they're not physically fit enough to defend themselves. And I know a lot of defense tactics are or ideas are just run from your attacker. Well, if you can't run a half a mile, then you're done. You can't fight back in that way. So the techniques that we teach are for anybody. And in the program, once you start in the program, the very first thing that we do is go over what you can and can't do. Know what you can do and know what you can't do, and be aware of that. So when we start teaching the techniques, you know, if it's something that you don't feel that you can do, maybe you have an old injury that's preventing you from doing certain things, then I'm not going to force you to learn that specific technique. You know,
and I would think that that would be very important, probably just as important as telling people what to do, helping them recognize their own limits so that they don't do something that then further puts them in danger or at risk.
Yeah, many of the defense classes will say, you know, do these certain things. I'm not telling somebody to do something specific. I'm saying go through my program, learn these techniques if you can, and then decide which is best for you. If it's best for you to use these techniques, great. If it's not, then find something that you can. So
this seems to me, by hearing you talk, a very empowering time as well. Do you feel, in your expert opinion as a R.A.D instructor, do you feel like part of the battle is in the mind as much as in the body, being prepared mentally to face an attacker? And how does R.A.D approach that?
It's definitely, the whole first class that we do is not techniques. It's a 9-hour course. Right now I'm breaking it up into 3-hour classes. So the first night is nothing but changing mindset. You know, women are all the time taught to behave a certain way or act a certain way or not be aggressive. So in that mindset, we're setting people up to be victims. So I take an entire class to work on how you view yourself as a woman, how you view yourself as being able to fight back. Do you only feel like you're protected if you're with somebody else? You know, and that's not feasible for everybody. Not everybody's going to be with somebody that can protect them 100% of the time, every day.
So what about those viewers that might be watching, and you've got a hook in them? They think, okay, this is maybe something that I want to know more about. What would you say to them in terms of the idea of empowerment, that this is not a man-hater course, that this is not men are evil and men are bad, and I think that is something that our movement has to overcome, that we very much welcome men to be involved in the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center and help us in any way that they can. We have male victims that we serve. How does R.A.D approach, in an effort to change mindset, to not send that message?
And I hear that all the time, you know, is that in our movement that we're male bashers and that we're this and that we're that, and it's not that at all. I think that the R.A.D program is not taking away from the purpose of the program is for women to be able to identify their own strengths, not base that strength off of somebody else. The reason why it's women only, and another reason why we get the whole male-hating thing is that it's a women-only class, and no men are allowed to come in at all. And that is because, statistically speaking, women that are victimized more by men. So, and the R.A.D program is fighting abduction techniques. It's not so much, you know, just you know, verbal techniques. It's if you are, you know, actually tried to be abducted for sexual assault or that type of thing.
And so statistically speaking, that's more often a male, and so they don't want to give men that upper hand to then develop a counter plan so that those techniques would not work. So having cleared the air in terms of somebody that might be thinking, well, you know, I don't want to go in there and hear, you know, how horrible men are. That's not going to happen. But what you are saying is that every woman has a personal responsibility to themselves. Every mom has a personal responsibility to their children. Every husband has a personal responsibility to their wife. It's for the community. It's for the women of the community to focus on their own strengths and to learn how to be protected and safe. So the first day is that mindset change. Is that a difficult class? Do you find resistance in that mindset change, or are people refreshed by what they hear?
Well, usually, you know, the first the first bit of it, I'm talking about statistics, and I'm talking about sexual assault definitions, because surprisingly enough, a lot of people don't know or don't think of, the legal terms of it, of what it would mean. So the first little part of it, I can tell that people are kind of, understanding, but there's a point in the class where it's like the light bulb goes off, and there's that instant click of, wow, I never thought of it that way. And for most women, that's how it is. When I went to the class, I'd never, thought of it like that. I knew that I wanted to learn self-defense, but I'd never put it in the perspective of, I'm going to be defending myself. And that's like one of the first questions I ask is, ultimately, who is responsible for your safety? And I don't think that women in general realize that they are, because for so long that they've been taught, don't walk alone at night, or you'll be safe if there's a man around, or that type of thing. So it's really an empowering moment, because usually the class gets there at about the same time, and they just kind of it switches. They're ready to learn the techniques. They're ready to get started on everything that we're doing. It's really empowering for the women that are in the class.
So it's a 3-day course, 9 hours. So do you have to complete all 3 classes in order to complete the course?
You have to complete all 3 classes, or the full 9 hours. The way that the program works is that you pay to come to the training. It's $25 to come to the training, and you receive your training manual. Once you receive that training manual, I'll sign that manual and date it, and then you can come to any class after that for free. It's a lifetime learning policy. So it's not just we're teaching the techniques and giving you the book and you go home and you make sure you're okay. It's, learn the techniques. If you need to come back and refresh, come back. And you can come back at any time.
Well, that sounds like a great deal. $25 for the rest of your life. You can go and take refresher courses, which I would think would be very important. So we've talked about day 1. Let's talk about day 2. Without giving away what you do, what would be your message? What would you tell viewers about why they would want to come to be a part of this program?
Day 2 is when we start into the actual techniques of self-defense. And what is really great about once we get that started is that I teach them the techniques, and then they actually get to use the techniques. They actually have impact target training to where they're actually going to get to use full force and hitting and seeing how that works. So it's really empowering for a lot of women. The first question I usually ask is, how many of you have ever hit something with your full force? And none of them have. Very rare have I had somebody that said, well, I have, so that's really another moment that they have when they are able to hit something with a technique they've been taught, see how it's effective, and realize that they have that strength to do that.
And so is this in part where the Paducah Police Department will be coming in to partner and to be that, to play that role? So are we using full force with an instrument or with a fake figure, or are we actually talking about doing this on an individual?
Right now, the partnership between us and the Paducah Police Department is in the process of growing, hopefully. Right now, they're going to be using on impact targets, meaning, kicking bags and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And eventually, I'm hoping that the program will grow into us actually having, and we call it aggressor, one of the officers or somebody that's able to go through the training at some point.
I see.
And we would be able to do the whole bit where they would actually fight off an attacker.
So there will be, I guess, real live exposure either way, whether it's through the target or through the officer or the aggressor. They're going to have an opportunity to practice out of the textbook what they're hearing and what they're seeing. Okay, so day 2, we start these techniques. We're learning the power, we're learning the strength. What happens in day 3?
Day 3, we just keep going. There are so many different techniques and so many different things that we go over. We, I teach the technique and then we practice it a lot so that it's something that they automatically know to do. And then once we've gone through the techniques, they try it out on the impact target and then go from there. There's a couple different scenarios that we have to work with. I don't want to give too much away so that
Okay.
people will come, but there are a couple different scenarios that we work through that will give the student an opportunity to not really visualize an attack, but know the intensity of an attack to where that they are prepared to fight back.
Okay. So how do they sign up? What do folks do if you've got them and they think, okay, I'm ready to do this, is something that my kids need to do or my wife needs to do or I need to do for myself? What happens now?
They call me and sign up. Right now the classes are, I'm starting them out a little bit smaller because obviously I'm the only instructor in our area, which is another thing that's unique. The closest R.A.D program that's offered in Kentucky is over 2 hours away.
Okay.
So this is something that people in our area should jump on because it's a nationally recognized program and it's being offered here. But they just call me and sign up, and I think right now we're going for 15 to 20 as the most
Per class.
Per class.
Okay.
So we'll get them on the list and just come on. It's being offered at the police department in their training room right now.
Okay, so if someone decides to sign up, they're going to call the center. And they're going to ask for LeAnne Garland, and then you're going to put them on a waiting list. Is that how that's going to work?
It depends on how many people have already signed up at that point. What I will do is I'll take their name, and once we get to that point of our cap for the class, right now I have 2 or 3 classes already set up for the rest of the year. So if the first class that's available, if it's already full, I'll move them to the next class. And hopefully I'll keep that process going to where nobody will ever have to be on a, quote, waiting list.
Okay.
They'll be in a specific class when they call.
And so folks need to know and keep in mind that if they sign up, they need to then come for 3 weeks. Is this once a week? So
Once
it's not
a week.
consecutively in the week. So a Tuesday and then the next Tuesday and then the next Tuesday, if that's how that works out.
It's
Okay.
three Tuesdays from 6 to 9. So if you make that initial commitment, which most people after that first night are ready for that second night. And that's what I've noticed is that, as soon as we end that next night, they don't want to stop. They want to keep going. So eventually we'll get to the point where maybe we can offer it all day, an all-day course. But right now it's 3 Tuesday nights from 6 to 9.
Okay. And so the cost is?
$25.
All right. And do they pay that up front? Do they pay that when they get there? How does that work?
They can pay it when they get there. Since we're having more people call and the interest in it is growing, to reserve your spot in the specific class that you want, I'm asking that you send the money in or drop it by our office. That guarantees that you'll be in that class that you called about. But either way, however they can get it there.
Well, LeAnne, I appreciate you so much coming on today, and we just have a few moments left. If you could tell the viewer, if you could talk to them and tell them why do they need to sign up? From your experience, from what you've seen, from working with the police officers, what have they seen? Why is this class important for members of this community?
There are tons of reasons why this is important. For your own personal safety, for your own personal attitude about how you feel about yourself, and just knowing that if you were ever in the position that you could be attacked, knowing that you have an option is the key thing. I always tell people that whatever you do to survive is great, but knowing that you have another option to fight back is the key thing.
I appreciate that so much. Well, thank you so much for watching another edition of Rays of Hope, and we'll hope to see you back here next time. The contact information will be on your screen, and we'd love to hear from you and hope that you sign up for self-defense with the Purchase Area Sexual Assault Center.